What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, we have a very interesting fight to talk about regarding the longest reigning champion in the sport of boxing currently as it stands today. That being none other than superstar boxer Mr. Gary Russell Jr. 31 wins, 1 loss, no draws, 18 wins by way of knockout, 33 years of age, 5'4", with a 64-inch arm reach. He will be taking on Magsayo, who is 23 wins, no loss, and no draws, 16 wins by way of knockout, 26 years of age, 5'6", with a 68-inch arm reach. Okay, Magsayo is a Philippine fighter, superstar out of the Philippines, who's a Manny Pacquiao fighter, okay, and a protege of Manny Pacquiao. And with that said, there's been a lot going on with Mr. Gary Russell Jr. ahead of this fight. This fight is scheduled to take place tomorrow night in New Jersey at Atlantic City. And with that said, it's January 22nd. With that said, Gary Russell Jr., he's been out the ring for quite some time. Gary Russell has not been in the ring since he fought King Tug Nyamba back in February of 2020. So it's 2 years since the last time we saw Gary Russell in the ring. Now, we know Gary Russell has been fighting once a year. He fought once in 2015, once in 2016, once in 2017, once in 2018, once in 2019, once in 2020, and he has not been in the ring since 2020, and now we're in 2022. So it's 2 years since Gary Russell has been in the ring. And shockingly, Mr. Gary Russell Jr. has missed weight at the weigh-in ahead of his fight with Magsayo. Okay? That's not like Gary Russell Jr. Now, he struggled with weight issues when he fought against two-time Olympic gold medalist, 3-division world champion, former unified lightweight world champion, Ukrainian superstar boxer, Vasyl Lomachenko. He struggled with weight issues in that fight, and that's the only blemish on his resume, okay? That's the loss on Gary Russell Jr.'s resume, is to Vasyl Lomachenko. And so, with that said, Gary Russell missed weight, and Gary Russell, he revealed that he suffered an injury, and he's injured going into this fight with Magsayo. Now, one thing I will say is not fair to Magsayo, claiming that you have an injury going into the fight. Because should he be victorious, it's already a built-in excuse for Gary Russell Jr. as to why he lost. And so, Magsayo is a bigger guy than he is. He's at 5'6", so he's 2 inches taller than Gary Russell. He has a 66-inch arm reach, so he has a 2-inch arm reach advantage over Gary Russell Jr. And he's a power puncher. Okay, so you have the classic power puncher versus the boxer puncher, because Gary Russell is a boxer puncher. Okay, Gary Russell is not short on power. That's not the first thing you think of when you think of Gary Russell. The first thing you think of when you're thinking about Gary Russell is Gary Russell's hand speed is the first thing that comes out, and the second thing is his boxing ability, his skill set. Okay, he's a southpaw. Okay, so he's gonna have the skill set advantage. He's gonna have the experience advantage. And he's going to have the hand speed advantage for sure over Magsayo, okay? But what's interesting is that Gary Russell Jr. has been inactive. Gary Russell Jr. has been going through things in his personal life with his dad, losing his brother, and inactivity, and struggles with promotional company with the PBC, Premier Boxing Champions, and struggling to get the fights that he's looking for, okay? And now he's saying he suffered an injury. Is this the perfect, is all the stars aligning for Magsayo to shock the world and defeat Gary Russell Jr.? Because no doubt about it, he's the underdog in this fight. Gary Russell Jr. is the more skilled fighter. He's the bigger name. He's the more popular fighter. What's interesting is this is a situation that made Manny Pacquiao who Manny Pacquiao is, okay? Manny Pacquiao, he was a replacement opponent, okay? And Manny Pacquiao, who's the 8th division world champion, iconic Filipino superstar boxer, you know, and Manny Pacquiao is a legend and an icon within the sport of boxing, okay? He's an icon and a legend in the sport of boxing. But Manny Pacquiao, he filled in on short notice. And that's how Manny Pacquiao became Manny Pacquiao that we know today. Because Manny Pacquiao, he fought Ledwaba back in 2001, and he was a fill-in opponent. He got a TKO victory, and he hasn't looked back since then. That was 2001. That's when he made a name for himself. That's when he became, he shocked the world. He announced to the sport of boxing that he's arrived, okay? And from that point on, Manny Pacquiao has not looked back since, okay? He's made a name for himself. Then he started to fight the likes of Eric Morales and Barrera and, Juan Manuel Marquez, and, started to truly announce himself when he fought those levels of opponents, okay? But that's when he made a name for himself, and he was the underdog in that fight, okay? He was the guy that was supposed to get beat that night. Ledwaba had 33 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw. He was the big name. He was supposed to have beaten Manny Pacquiao that night, and Manny Pacquiao, he shocked the world and upset him, and he never looked back since, okay? And since then, Manny Pacquiao has become a legend, an icon. Is this setting up to be the same situation and scenario for Magsayo, who is a Filipino fighter, a Manny Pacquiao fighter, who has a lot of power? Is this setting up for that type of situation? Because if he beats Gary Russell Jr. and announces himself to the boxing world and does it in dramatic fashion, because let's not get it twisted, he has a lot of power, okay? He's a pressure fighter who's has an unorthodox pressuring style similar to Manny Pacquiao, angles that he uses to get his to be effective. Man, imagine if he upset Gary Russell Jr. The sky's the limits, okay? And this could be the perfect storm for him, okay? Because Gary Russell, again, he's dealing with issues with his dad. He stated that he'd been training himself for this training camp. Now, we know that his brother helps train. His brother has been doing more of the training with him than his actual dad. You can see his brother in his corner for quite some time, for years now. So his brother, possibly had to attend to his father, right? Now, he comes from a boxing background, okay? His whole family, is attached to the sport of boxing. They have a whole lineage, a bloodline, okay? And so with that said, it's not out the norm. You guys like Nonito Donaire, the Filipino Flash, who's getting knockouts and, fighting late in his career and still being effective. And he trains himself, him and his wife. So it's not, completely out the ordinary to see a fighter train himself. But in this case, in this instance, you have Gary Russell, who's training himself, but also dealing with a lot with his dad. And he's dealing with a lot when it comes to, the promotional portion of his career, and losing his brother. And now for him to miss weight is the reason why, one of the reasons why he cited that he struggled and lost to Lomachenko, okay? Because the scale was off, and he kept having to force himself to lose weight, and in all actuality, the scale was incorrect. So, he was draining himself. Now, he only came in 126.5, so he didn't completely come in at a massive, like pounds that he had to lose, but he definitely had to lose weight. That's a half a pound, okay? And that's out the norm for Gary Russell Jr. Gary Russell Jr. is always in shape. He stays in the gym. He stays fit, okay? And so when Gary Russell has to lose weight, Gary Russell is losing muscle, okay? He's losing endurance, and he's a timing fighter, okay? And so for him to fight once a year since 2015, and we get all the way to this fight, and he's 2 years out the ring, and now Mark Magsayo is fresh, he's hungry, he's looking for the upset. He has the machine behind him. Manny Pacquiao, is behind him, and you know, promoting him and, you know, uplifting him, man, this could be the perfect storm for him, okay, to win this fight. Nonetheless, I believe that skill set wise, Gary Russell is going to beat Mark Magsayo, okay? Because I think that he's just technically sound. I think that he's sharper. I think that he's accurate, and he's for sure the better pure boxer. But if his timing is off, and Mark Magsayo, who's the bigger guy, who's the stronger guy, who's going to be more hungry, because he has a point to prove. You understand? He has this is the opportunity for him to, you know, announce himself to the world. Okay, so he has a lot of hunger. He has a lot of motivation. Gary Russell Jr., as we saw when he fought against, you know, in his fight with King Tug, you know, a number y'all, Gary Russell, he goes through the motions, right? Because he's so skilled, he's so talented, you know, and these guys are not on his level when it comes to that. So it could be a case of Gary Russell going through the motion, not being that hungry. You know, this is a fight Magsayo is a stay busy just for Gary Russell is getting back in the ring, showcasing his talents and getting on to the bigger fights, the Gervonta Tank Davises, the rematch with Lomachenko, you know, things of that nature. That's what's on the table for Gary Russell Jr. For Mark Magsayo, this is an opportunity to announce yourself to the world. So the hunger is on a completely different level. And this could be the perfect scenario and perfect situation for Mark Magsayo to upset Gary Russell Jr. But again, in my opinion, I think that Gary Russell Jr. Is going to be too sharp. Gary Russell Jr. knows letdowns. He had that situation with Vasyl Lomachenko that was a letdown, and I don't believe that he's going to let it happen again. Now, Gary Russell, he stated that after this fight, after the fight is done with Mark Magsayo, he will let the world know what his injury was. He didn't want to let the world know that, you know, he just let the world know he was injured, but he didn't want to let the world know what the injury was. So he stated that after the fight, he'll reveal what the injury was. I think that Gary Russell's going to win a split decision. I think that Mark Magsayo is going to make this a tough fight, a very close fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if the judges give it to Mark Magsayo, okay? But Gary Russell Jr., I believe, was a split decision. I think it's going to be he's going to have to bite down in this fight. He's injured. Again, I don't believe that he's all the way mentally into this fight, and I think that, you know, like the Isaac Cruz and Gervonta Tank Davis fight, it's going to be a lot of that talk, and there's going to be a lot of controversy. A lot of people are going to say Gary Russell lost the fight. Gary Russell shouldn't have got the nod, and people are going to call for a rematch and so on and such. So let's see how it plays out. I got Gary Russell winning a split decision over Mark Magsayo. So let's see how this unfolds and plays out. Now he's drained himself. You know, he has to go back and make weight. There's a lot playing on. There's a lot of factors working against Gary Russell, but I think he'll bite down and get the win. But that's all I got for y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.
You're watching Blue Blood Sports TV. Wow.